For 4 decades, his was the voice that counted down America's weekend. He was the sound of Saturday morning, the voice of a cartoon dog a whole generation grew up loving. When Kasem died on Father's Day in 2014, his own children were not allowed to bury him. His body left the funeral home. It crossed into Canada, then it crossed the Atlantic. 6 months later, the legend of American radio was lowered into a cemetery in Oslo, Norway, and not one of his children was standing there to say goodbye. This is not a story about a will. It's a story about a single legal word, conservatorship, the paperwork that decides who controls a parent when that parent can no longer speak for himself. And it's a story about what happens to a family when nobody in the fight is asking the one question that matters: what did he actually want? Kasem was a self-made American voice. The son of Lebanese immigrants, born in Detroit, he built a career out of the top 40, a countdown, a long-distance dedication, and a sign-off that millions could recite by heart: keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars. To a second generation, he was Shaggy, the lovable coward in Scooby-Doo. For most of his life, he was the friendliest sound in the American house. None of that friendliness survived what happened at the end. By 2013, Casey was in his 80s and slipping away. Doctors first said Parkinson's disease. Later, they would reclassify it as Lewy body dementia, a condition that steals the mind while the body lingers. And a body that lingers is exactly the situation these legal forms were built for. Because when a person can no longer decide for themselves, someone else has to. That someone is a conservator, a court-appointed guardian who controls the medical care, the schedule, the visitors, sometimes the money. In plain terms, a conservatorship is the paperwork that hands one person total control over another's life. Whoever holds it, holds everything. And in this family, 2 sides believed it belonged to them. On one side was his wife of more than 30 years, Kasem, an actress you might remember as Loretta from Cheers. On the other side were his children from his first marriage, Carrie, a radio host herself, along with Mike and Julie. The children alleged they were being shut out. They said Gene had barred them from seeing their own father. So they did something extraordinary for a private family. They went public. They stood outside his home and protested on the sidewalk, carrying signs asking to be let in. Think about how much distance a family has to travel to end up protesting on the pavement outside the home of a man they love. In 2013, they first asked the court to intervene. That petition was denied. A judge looked at the situation and found that Casey was being well cared for. For the moment, the door stayed closed. Then the situation changed. In May 2014, a judge named Carrie the temporary conservator of her father's medical care. A hearing to make that control permanent was set for June the 20th. On paper, the children had won the one thing they'd been fighting for: the legal right to sit beside their dad. But there was a problem. By the time the court moved, Casey was already gone. Not dead, but missing. Gene, the children alleged, had quietly moved him out of state. When the court asked where he was, Gene's own attorney told them Casey was, quote, no longer in the United States. Think about that sentence. One of the most recognizable voices in America, and a courtroom could not find the man behind it. So Judge Daniel S. Murphy did something you rarely see in a family dispute. He ordered a court investigator and Adult Protective Services to physically locate him. A missing persons search for a living man, an 82-year-old with dementia, launched from a courtroom. He was found at a home in Kitsap County, Washington. On June the 1st, 2014, paramedics arrived at that Washington home to take Casey to a hospital. His daughter Carrie was there. What happened next was caught on camera, and it is one of the strangest scenes ever filmed in an American family feud. As the ambulance doors closed, Kasem picked up a package of raw ground beef and hurled it toward Carrie. On camera, she said, "In the order of King David, I throw this piece of meat to you, to the dogs, raw meat, thrown across a driveway over a dying man." It became the image that told the whole country this had stopped being a disagreement. Every accusation in this feud was contested, and it would fall to the courts to sort the facts. But the video existed, and the nation had seen it. And here is the heart of it, the part that turns this from a spectacle into a tragedy. because Kasem had already answered the question everyone was fighting over. Back around 2007, he had signed an end-of-life directive. In it, he wrote that he did not want to be kept alive in, his words, a mere biological existence. He had put it in writing, years earlier, in ink, long before there was any driveway, any ambulance, any camera. The calmest voice in this entire story was Casey's own, on a page nobody was listening to. In his final days, the court battle came down to that single page. On June the 9th, a judge ordered his infusions, his artificial food and water, restored. 2 days later, on June the 11th, that order was reversed, giving Carey, as his conservator, the authority to withhold artificial nutrition and hydration, in keeping with the directive Casey himself had signed. His doctor said continuing the infusions would only prolong his suffering. This is the quiet cruelty of it. The machinery of the fight had grown so loud that it took a courtroom, twice, just to let a man's own written wish be honored. On June the 15th, 2014, Father's Day, Kasem died. He was 82 years old. In the end, the only paperwork that truly spoke for him was the page he had written with his own hand. You would think the fighting would end at death. It didn't. After Casey died, Gene removed his body from the Washington funeral home. In July of 2014, a court issued a restraining order over the remains, and yet the family alleged the body kept moving, first to Montreal in Canada, and then across the ocean to Oslo, Norway. Gene claimed Casey had Norwegian heritage and would have wanted it, a claim his children strongly disputed. In December 2014, nearly 6 months after he died, Kasem was finally buried at Vestre Gravlund Cemetery in Oslo. None of his children were there. The voice that had signed off American radio for 40 years was laid to rest in a country he had never lived in, at a grave his children could not visit. He was, in the most literal sense, the man who was moved twice, once while he was alive and could not be found, and once after death when he could not be brought home. It's important to be precise about what this was and what it wasn't. This was a civil family dispute, not a crime. The Los Angeles County District Attorney reviewed the children's elder abuse allegations and in 2015 declined to prosecute. A civil wrongful death lawsuit was later settled in December 2019, with no admission of liability and no finding of fault. A countersuit was dismissed. No court ever ruled that anyone here was guilty of anything. In law, this was a family that disagreed and a system that let them. What did change was the law. Carrie Kasem founded a foundation in her father's name and pushed for what became known as visitation rights legislation. The idea was simple, and it should have been obvious. An adult child should be able to ask a court to visit an ailing parent, and a guardian should have to notify the family of a hospitalization, a death, or a burial. Versions of that law passed in more than a dozen states. It exists so that no other family will ever have to search a courtroom, a driveway, and 3 countries just to say goodbye. There is a phrase for the people caught in the middle of stories like this: the sandwich generation, the grown children raising kids of their own while a parent's mind slips away. Millions of them will one day hold or lose exactly this kind of paperwork. Kasem spent his life giving voice to other people's stories, one countdown at a time. At the end, the fight wasn't over what he owned. It was over who owned him, his care, his final days, even his body. So here's the question this one leaves behind. If you couldn't speak for yourself tomorrow, who would hold the paperwork that speaks for you? Have you written down what you'd actually want? And does the person holding it know? Because the calmest voice in Kasem's story was his own on a page. They just had to stop fighting long enough to read it. We read the fine print so you don't have to. This is the fine print.